Let's have a look at question 26 in this video. So we have two types of second-hand laptop, good and bad. A good laptop is worth 700 euros to James and a bad laptop is worth 200 euros. Sarah has a laptop to sell, so Sarah is the seller, James is the buyer. Sarah values the laptop, the good laptop, at 400, the bad laptop at 0. Now if James is risk neutral and there's a 50% chance that Sarah has a good laptop, is he gonna buy it or not? So I've written here the data, what matters. The valuation of the buyer, who is James, of a good laptop is 700. The valuation of a bad laptop for the buyer is 200. And then here we have it for the seller, 400 and 0. And at the moment we have the probability of getting a good laptop from the seller is 1/2, which means that the probability of getting a bad laptop from the seller is also 1/2, since both of them have to add up to 1. Now the question is James gonna buy or not? Well, James is gonna buy as long as he's willing to pay the price that Sarah wants. Now, how do we think about the price in this case? We think about the price in terms of the valuation. The valuation is an estimate of how much the customer is willing to pay and how much the seller is willing to sell. So in this case, when we want to compute the price that the buyer is willing to pay, we have to take into account that he is considering the fact that he might get either a good laptop or a bad laptop. So he's dealing with uncertainty. And recall, when we're dealing with uncertainty, we're dealing with expectation, expected value of getting a good laptop for the buyer is gonna take into account the probability that he would get a good laptop, which he would be willing to pay 700 euros. So we keep that in mind, the valuation of a good laptop for the buyer, plus the probability that he might get, I just write 1 minus p to see the distinction, the remaining probability that he might get a bad laptop for which he would be willing to pay 200 euros. So we'll keep that in mind, for a bad laptop. Let's compute the math here and see what we get. We would have the following, the expected value of, let me also write here, of the buyer, because the buyer, we need to know how much the buyer is paying since he has the money, he has the power. Probability 1/2, valuation of a good laptop for the buyer 700 euros, plus the other 1/2 times the valuation of a bad laptop for the buyer 200 euros. If we do the math, 700 divided by 2, it's 350, 200 by 2 is 100, so in total he would be paying 450, because the expected value is how much he would be willing to pay, since he already takes into account the fact that he either will get a good or a bad. So he accounts for the probability of getting a bad laptop as well, meaning that this would be the maximum willingness to pay, the price that he would be willing to pay to get a good laptop. Now the question is this deal gonna be made? So is the seller gonna sell? Let's have a look. The valuation of the seller of a good laptop, that's what we're interested in, is 400 euros, meaning that she would be willing to sell at 400 euros, meaning that's the price that the seller is gonna accept. But since the buyer is already paying more than that, so the seller is even happier to do it, meaning the deal will take place. The price of the buyer compensates the willingness to sell. So from here we can conclude that the price of the buyer, the willingness to pay is higher than the willingness to sell, so the deal would be made. So yes, James is gonna buy, so buy. Now let's leave it like that for this video. In the next video we have one more question.